The Blackmagic Hyperdeck Studio HD Plus. I've got two of them here, and I've been told that I'm one of the first few people in the United States to get these devices. Now, what would you use this for? Typically video playback on a live stream or video recording, but more on that in just a moment. Hey everyone, how's it going? Zephan Blacksburg here, and today I've got two of the brand new Blackmagic Hyperdeck Studio HD Pluses. These two devices act as both a recording unit as well as a video playback unit, and I've got two of them here today to do a quick little unboxing to show you what's inside the box, what we're getting, talk about some of the features of this and more. So let me slide one in here. I've just slid this out of the box. This is what you're going to get. It's got some foam packaging, and then you're going to have a couple little pamphlets from Blackmagic. So one is kind of your getting started, how to find the online manual and instructions, links to your software installer if you need to install your software to manage it, and then of course a couple of stickers from Blackmagic and a link for a free download of DaVinci Resolve 17. Now, this is not the licensed studio version of DaVinci, unfortunately. I wish it was, but let's dive into the actual Hyperdeck itself. I want to share with you quickly what's inside, and then we'll talk about what I've had up until now and how I've been doing my video playbacks on my live streams, how I've been doing my recordings, and we'll talk about the benefits of upgrading to this brand new device. So inside we have our Hyperdeck, and you'll notice it's definitely a little bit bigger than the Hyperdeck that you've seen in the past. So the Hyperdeck in the past, the Hyperdeck Mini, those typically you could fit 3 across a rack mount in a typical 19-inch wide rack mount. Now these take up half, so you can only fit 2 of them on a rack mounted shelf. On the front you've got some nice new big buttons, your typical scroll dial, and of course the LCD screen. But something new on this side next to the SD card readers is actually a speaker button that allows you to preview the audio that's playing out. So there's a built-in speaker inside of the Hyperdeck, and then when you hold that down, you can actually preview the sound that's coming out of it. And of course, there's a headphone 3/4 inch out. Now on the back here, we have a couple of things. We've got our typical 3-prong power input. We also have a 4-prong power input. We've got a remote in, remote out. We have an Ethernet port here, and I'm gonna talk about that in just a moment. It's one of the drawbacks that I think to this new device. We have a USB-C for an external disk, so you can actually record to an external hard drive. A monitor out, a reference out, timecode out, reference in, timecode in, HDMI out, HDMI in, 2 SDI outputs, an SDI in, and an SDI loop out. So a lot of things going on here, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. And then of course, a little baggie with those tiny rubber feet. So if you're not mounting this into a rack mount and you don't want it to scratch up the base of a table or a desk that it's sitting on, for some of you, you might be bringing this out on a live stream and setting this up each time. Some nice little rubber feet just to prevent it from scratching that up. So I'm gonna push this off to the side for a second, but first I wanna talk about how I've been using the original Hyperdeck and how that's come into play in my workspace. So we do a lot of live streaming. Ever since the COVID pandemic started, live streaming has actually been the big bread and butter for our business. So having these Hyperdecks on site with us has been fantastic for 2 reasons. One, the first is we can play back videos directly into our ATEM Mini Pro, ATEM Mini Extreme, ATEM Mini Extreme ISO, whatever model that you have, you can use this as a video playback device. Now, one of the drawbacks to that I've found over time has been the older Hyperdeck Minis are very finicky with what codec and what format of video that you're putting onto the SD card that's playing back. So typically in the past, we've always converted everything to Apple ProRes 422 or 422 LT and made sure that everything is coming in at the same frame rate just to make sure that we don't have any issues with that. And that's, for the most part, given us about a 90% success rate. But we have seen them act a little funky if there's other video files on the card that aren't the same. So I'm hoping that this is something that Blackmagic is going to work out a little bit in the future here. Maybe even with this one, we'll have to test it out a little bit more. Now that's for the video playback side, but on the recording side, you can actually put in an SD card into the two SD card slots, and you can record your program output or even an isolated feed. So if you wanted to take, say, an auxiliary output of the ATEM Mini Extreme, you could send it there as well. But this acts as a recorder. What have I been using up until now? I've been bringing the ATEM Shogun 7 with me, mostly because it has 4 SDI inputs and could theoretically act as a backup switcher if something broke or went down. And that's been my main recorder, but that records onto solid state drives, and as nice as that is, that can get a little bit more expensive over time, whereas recording to SD cards, being able to pop out a little 64 gig card, hand it to the client or hand it to someone else and you're good to go, that's something that I've really liked and really enjoyed. I'd much rather replace, a $40 SD card than, say, a $200 or $300 SSD hard drive. So that's one of the benefits with bringing one of these on set for recording. Now, let's talk about some of the newer features in this device as things have changed, because the older Hyperdeck Minis, I actually have 2 of them in my rack-mounted rig that comes out with me on live streams. We're going to reveal that to you in a later YouTube video, but that's still getting reworked now that we have these new devices. But the new devices, some of the key new features that I want to talk about are, one, the fact that this has an HDMI input on the back of this. So the previous Hyperdeck Minis only had an SDI input, which meant that you could only bring in an SDI feed. Now, if you were using something like the ATEM Mini, ATEM Mini Extreme, or any of those models that all use HDMI output, you are either dead in the water, or if you had to do it, you could take one of those bidirectional converters, send SDI into the converter, HDMI out, or vice versa. So with the older ones, you'd have to do HDMI in and SDI out to the older model Hyperdeck. But now with this one, we have both an SDI input and an HDMI input. This means that we could hook this up to, theoretically any live streaming device and not have any issues with making that recording. This will record up to 4K, so that's a really nice benefit. It's not as necessary when we're using things like the ATEM Mini lineup of live streaming devices, because obviously they max out at 1080, but it is nice to know that you could theoretically hook this up to a 4K camera and record that in here as well as a backup. One of the other nice features of this was actually that button that I mentioned earlier on the front, the ability to hit this little button on the side and preview the audio that's playing out of it with the built-in speaker. This is something where if you're on a live stream and you just want to make sure that the audio is actually working, it's something that you could do, assuming that you're behind the scenes and that playing that audio is not going to interfere with the actual live stream. Now, what I really like about this one, and why I'm not really concerned about this being a half rack and only being able to fit 2 of these, is the fact that you have all of these outputs on the back. So I could have an HDMI in going into this, say from my ATEM Mini Extreme. I could loop that HDMI out and send it anywhere else. And then I also have 2 SDI outputs as well. So this is giving me that flexibility to maybe send that program feed to a TV screen or to a projector or even to a backup recording deck if I wanted to. So to have 3 outputs coming out of this between both HDMI and then the 2 SDIs, it's a really nice feature. And then of course being able to record a redundant feed of that on the SD cards as well is very, very nice. Now, let's talk about some of the downsides of this. Really, the biggest downsides are twofold. One, this Ethernet port on the back is not a power over Ethernet port, which is such a shame. And Blackmagic, I'm kind of disappointed in you for doing this. The original Hyperdeck Minis were power over Ethernet, meaning if you rack mount this inside of a case, instead of fitting those really big long power cables into the case and plugging them into your power adapter or power conditioner for that matter, instead of taking up all that space in the bottom of the rack, you could just plug these into an internet switch, which you may already have in the rack case. I know I do, and that allows all of these devices to talk to each other. So Blackmagic, I'm a little bit disappointed that you didn't do that, because now I've got to go back to a power cable, which brings me to my next point, and the second downside to these is that you still don't supply AC power cords. What's up with that, Blackmagic? Why do I always have to go out every single time that I buy a Blackmagic device and get a power cord? Literally, like, your ATEMs are the only thing that you send power cords with. Why can't you do it with these? It's a simple cable. I would love to just get it at the same time that I get these things so I can actually plug them in and use them. So Blackmagic, if you're listening, please, please, please listen to your viewers, listen to your people. Please send us power cords with these. It would be so much easier and so less annoying. Okay, now it's time for a live demonstration. Now I've taken an SD card. This is a pro grade 128 gigabyte. This is a UHS-2 V90 card. So you can see right there on the box there, UHS-2 cards are compatible with this. Now I saved a 2 to 3 minute long video that has some audio mixed in with it as Apple ProRes 422 LT in a 29.97 frame rate. Now this is something that's been very common for me in making sure that all of my videos are the same on the past Hyperdecks. I went ahead and saved it, popped it on the card, popped the card in, and I pressed the play button, which queued up the video. Now, this is not something that you would typically do manually. Usually, the Hyperdeck will be connected using an Ethernet cable to your switch, which will also be connected to your ATEM. This way, your ATEM can talk to it and cue that video to be played, as well as shift over to other videos that might be on the card. But one of the features that I did want to test out for you and show you today was if I start to hit play on this, we can actually hear it. So this little button here, the little speaker button on the top left, when it's not lit up, it won't play back. If you press it once and hold it in, you start to hear a preview of the music. And if you have two hands available, you can scroll this wheel on the other side and it'll turn the volume up or down. Now on top of that, what I found out was that if you, instead of press it and hold it in, if you double tap, it will keep that audio playing constantly throughout. So when would you use this feature? Well, one, obviously we like to see that things are actually working, and sometimes it's not so easy to troubleshoot them. Two, if you wanted to just make sure that your sound sounded good, that it wasn't distorted or garbled. I know that some people have made the mistake of having the ATEM Minis set up with line or mic when they were getting the opposite. So line when they were getting a mic feed, mic when they were getting a line feed or something of that sort, and they're having issues with their audio. So this is a great way just for a quick test. Even if you don't have headphones to plug into that 1/4-inch jack there, you can either press the button and hold it into preview or double tap it to let that just constantly play with the built-in speaker. So overall, I'm very excited to be putting these Blackmagic Hyperdeck Studio HD Pluses into my rack mount build. I think what I may consider doing is actually putting one in the build, leaving one of the older minis, so there's still going to be a little bit of a gap on that rack mount just for some airflow, and then I might keep one of these in the studio here for when we do live streams on the spot, just for easier recording, as opposed to taking out the Atmos Shogun to need to record. These will record on H.264, ProRes, or DNX, versus the Shogun was recording in ProRes, and so those files were absolutely humongous. They didn't have the ability to record to H.264 on the Shogun 7. So being able to record a smaller size that's really just for like YouTube delivery or sending to a client on Google Drive, which for the most part they're just going to upload to YouTube, I think that's going to be very valuable for this device. If you like this video, if you're interested in seeing more unboxings, more trainings, more videos about Blackmagic, live streaming gear, anything like that, please do me a quick favor and just, you see that button right down there? There's a like button and there's a subscribe button. If you could hit that like button and then hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, and if you are subscribed, how about you leave me a comment down below? Let me know what you think of the new Hyperdecks, and if you have any questions, let me know. I would love to kind of take your question, test it out, see what I can find out for you as well, since I know that these are still kind of new and not many people in the United States have access to them just yet. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.